The population of England and Wales grew by 6.3% in the decade up to the last census. Sounds ordinary. Sounds like the kind of quiet growth any developed country goes through. But in these 11 British places, the national average hides something far bigger. Entire high streets changed language. School rolls doubled in a decade. The share of people ticking white British on the census dropped by 15, 20, even 30 points in 10 years flat. ONS figures ranked by the sharpest shift in the shortest time. By the end, you will know which English market town has the highest share of Lithuanian-born residents in Britain, which London borough transformed fastest, and which city became the first where fewer than a third of residents called themselves white British. Here is the countdown. Corby, Northamptonshire. Corby was the town the Scots built. In the 1930s, thousands of Glaswegians moved south to work the steelworks. Locals called it Little Scotland for the best part of 50 years. The accent stuck. Then 2004 happened. EU expansion. Poland joined. Corby, with its cheap housing and its steady warehouse work, pulled in one of the fastest-growing Eastern European populations outside London. Polish is now one of the most commonly heard languages on the high street. The Scottish community is still there, so is the chippy that has been on George Street for half a century. But the signs above the shops now read Polski Sklep, Biedronka and Tesco, all on the same block. Corby did not swap one community for another, it stacked them. That stacking is the whole story. Corby used to export steel, now it imports people, and that has done more for the population than the furnace ever did. Number 10, Peterborough. Peterborough has a stat most places would kill for or panic about depending on your politics. Between the last two censuses, the number of children under 15 in the city rose by 23.8%. It was the second fastest rise in England. Only Dartford in Kent beat it. The cause is straightforward. Polish, Portuguese, Pakistani, Lithuanian and increasingly Kurdish families who arrived in the 2000s have reached childbearing age, and they had kids. A quiet cathedral town with a railway hub has turned into one of the most linguistically diverse places in the east of England. Drive through Millfield, the area locals half-jokingly call Little Poland, and you will hear 6 languages on one street before you reach the end of it. Peterborough's schoolyards are the loudest census data you will ever hear, but the next town on the list changed even faster, and it has a population under 30,000. Number 9. Wisbech in the Fenland district. Wisbech is not a city, it is a Georgian market town on the River Nene, surrounded by flat, wet farmland. And yet, in the central Wisbech wards, 19.5% of residents arrived in the UK in the decade before the last census. That is not a London statistic, that is not a Manchester statistic, that is a Fenland town of under 30,000 people. The reason is agriculture. The fields around Wisbech feed half the country, and the picking, packing and processing is done largely by Latvian, Lithuanian, Romanian and Bulgarian labour. In Wisbech Riverside Ward, only 67% of residents were born in the UK. If you grew up there in 1990, that figure was in the high 90s. Wisbech is not a cosmopolitan city, it is a market town. That is exactly what makes the numbers remarkable. 8. Bradford, West Yorkshire. Bradford is a city built on newcomers. In the 19th century, Irish and German migrants rebuilt it around wool. In the 1950s and 60s, Pakistani families came to run the night shifts in mills no English worker would touch. On the most recent figures, Bradford has 101,900 non-UK-born residents, 18.7% of the population. That is the second largest Pakistani-born population in England and Wales, behind only Birmingham. The demographics are honest about the costs mined. Bradford still sits in the top 10 of the English Deprivation Index, and life expectancy in the poorest wards trails the national average by almost 8 years. But the Pakistani business ecosystem, including curry houses, textiles and cash and carry networks, is worth hundreds of millions a year to the Yorkshire economy. Bradford has been a city of newcomers since the looms. The only thing that has changed is where the newcomers come from. Birmingham. Britain's second city crossed a threshold almost nobody talked about at the time. A decade ago, white British residents made up 52% of Birmingham. At the last census, that share was 43%. That is a 9-point drop in a single decade. 51.4% of the million-plus population is now non-white. Three things happened at once. Pakistani and Bangladeshi families, who are younger on average, kept having children. New African and Caribbean migration moved into wards such as Handsworth and Aston. Older white British residents moved out to Solihull and the Worcestershire commuter belt. Birmingham Airport, the coming HS2 terminus, and the universities keep pulling more people in. The transformation was not gentle, and those community frictions have not fully settled. Birmingham did not quietly diversify. Birmingham shifted faster than any major English city, and the next three places on this list shifted harder still. Tower Hamlets grew by 22.1% in the last decade. It was the fastest growth of any local authority in London. Some of that is Canary Wharf and the luxury flats around South Quay, but the bulk is the Bangladeshi community, anchored in the borough since the 1970s and now making up roughly 35% of the population, around 107,000 people. That is the largest Bangladeshi origin population anywhere in Britain. Walk Brick Lane on a Friday evening. Mosques and cocktail bars, halal butchers and city workers in shirt sleeves, all inside 300 metres of each other. The median age in Tower Hamlets is 30, the national median is 42. That one gap tells you more than any ethnicity chart. Tower Hamlets is where the richest bankers in Europe and the oldest immigrant community in London live 3 streets apart and do not nod at each other. If you want to see the sharpest 10-year change anywhere in the country, look here. A decade ago, 58.3% of Barking and Dagenham identified as white. At the last census, it was 44.9%, a 13-point drop in 1 decade. The Asian population rose from 15.9% to 25.9%. The black population rose from 20% to 21.5%. Dagenham was Ford's British heartland for 70 years. When the assembly lines wound down, property prices stayed well below the London average, and a huge new wave of Nigerian, Ghanaian, Romanian, and Bangladeshi families moved in. The borough's total population grew by 17.7%. Barking and Dagenham went from Ford factory suburb to the most transformed borough in London, and almost nobody outside the M25 noticed. Quick note before we carry on. Number 4 is the place sitting at the top of almost every demographic chart outside London, and most Britons have never actually been there. Stick with it. Number 4, Slough, Berkshire. 64% of Slough is non-white. That is the highest proportion of any local authority outside Greater London. Slough has the largest Polish-born population in the UK by count. It has one of the biggest Punjabi Sikh communities in the country, centred around the Gurdwara on Wexham Road. It has a major Pakistani community, a growing Somali community, and more Romanian speakers than plenty of actual Romanian towns. The driver is the Slough Trading Estate, the oldest industrial park in Europe, 7,000 businesses and 25,000 jobs, with a direct Elizabeth line into Paddington. The job market is voracious, and so is the rental market. Slough is not on anyone's tourism list, but on any migration chart, it sits right at the top. Boston, Lincolnshire. Remember what I said at the start about the market town with the highest proportion of Lithuanian-born residents in the country? This is it. 5.6% of Boston's population was born in Lithuania. That is not a London ward. That is a flat farming town in Lincolnshire with a population of 70,500. Another 5.4% were born in Poland, the second highest Polish share in Britain after Slough. A decade ago, 83.2% of Boston residents had been born in England. On the latest figures, that is 75.1%. And here is the contradiction the national press loves. Boston voted 75.6% to leave the European Union, the highest leave share in the country. The Eastern European workforce stayed anyway because the fields did not stop needing picking. Boston voted the hardest for Brexit. Boston has the most Lithuanians in Britain. Both things are true at the same time, and that contradiction is the town. 2. Luton, Bedfordshire. Luton was a Vauxhall town with car workers, straw hats and Arsenal's old nursery side. In the latest census, 31.8% of Luton was white British, compared with 74.4% nationally. 54.8% of the town is non-white. The Muslim population grew from 49,991 a decade earlier to 74,191. That is a 48.4% rise in 10 years. 20.5% of the town reports limited English proficiency, compared with a national average of 17.1%. In a town the size of Luton, that is around 45,000 residents. The Romanian community, driven by Luton airport jobs and the EasyJet maintenance base, is now large enough that Romanian is a routine high street language. Luton is what happens when a town accepts every wave, refuses none, and keeps going. The result is messy. The result is also very much alive. Leicester. Here is the city I promised at the start. It is the first place in Britain where fewer than a third of residents, 33% on the nose, identified as white British. The Indian origin population is now fractionally larger, about a third of the city, making Leicester the only English city where the Indian community is the single biggest ethnic group. 59.1% of the population is non-white. Leicester has been described as a no-majority city, and the label fits. Gujarati shopkeepers, Somali students, Polish plumbers, Iranian dentists, and white British retirees all live in a city with genuinely no single dominant community. There are tensions. The Hindu-Muslim unrest in Belgrave in 2022 was visible and widely reported. But Leicester has also been quietly more productive per head than most English cities outside London, and the textile sector alone, largely South Asian-owned, puts over £1 billion into the local economy each year. Leicester did not become something new. Leicester became what most of urban Britain, on current demographic lines, will look like in 20 years. Just first, just most visibly, and for better or worse, most honestly.